So welcome today to our ASQ Innovation Technical Community session, Why the 21st Century Requires Collaboration, Innovation, and a New Style of Leadership. You are in for such a treat for all of our attendees and those are listening to our recording after the event. Dr. Bettina von Stamm, a phenomenal woman that has a academic background, commercial background, and an industry background working with individuals, teams, and leaders to really help move the trajectory of innovation forward. You can read her phenomenal bio here, but I want to just talk about two things, and that's one, her holistic approach to creating frameworks, methodology, practices, as well as supporting that through education, mentoring, and teaching and coaching for each and every one of you that are really on this innovation journey. And secondarily is just her thought leadership that she brings to the field and to the focus area, deeply rooted in practitioners' experience and really overlaid with this creativity to think out of the box as well as offer new ideas and new ways forward for organizations, leaders, and practitioners. I just want to say thank you so much for our phenomenal, esteemed guest speaker, Dr. Bettina von Stamm, and I warmly welcome you, ma'am, to our presentation today, Why the 21st Century Requires Collaboration, Innovation, and a New Style of Leadership. I will now pass.
Brilliant. Except, Ronna, that you've gone, I think you cut yourself off a little bit too early, but thank you so much for that very, very kind and glowing introduction that you gave me. It's quite something to live up to now. Now let me see that I share my slides now, and I don't know why they have disappeared. There, no, that's not what I want. Why can I not see my slides? Let me try again. We've just tried it and it worked beautifully, so hopefully it's just a question. Now you should be seeing my slides, but I still see the other. Let me try that again. No. Press play. If I could have some kind of feedback to make sure that you're actually seeing my slide.
Absolutely perfect.
Brilliant. Okay, lovely. Well, a very warm welcome from me from a beautiful late summer's evening in Munich, where I am based. And I've changed the title slightly because I think really what it is all about and what has affected my thinking even further is this post-COVID world in which we are living. I think the message still remains the same about needing to collaborate and to innovate, and that new leadership is required. And on top of that, as I just said, there is this layer of the additional new context of world of work that the COVID has presented us with. And I'd really like to just start by summarizing or taking a look at the 21st century context, because I think it is really just so important that we understand what is so special about this context, so that we are ready and willing to embrace the changes that are necessary to thrive in this new kind of world. And I'm pretty sure that all of you have heard the term VUCA before. And just to remind you all, sort of VUCA, the V stands for volatile, which means that if in the past, even if we had changes, even the changes were quite predictable in the past. But today, the changes have become utterly unpredictable. And for me, one of the ways I noticed it is that when I'm traveling, about a week before I travel, I tend to look at the weather chart to make sure that I'm packing the right kind of stuff. And I've noticed that, you know, when I did that 5, 10, 20 years ago, there was no problem looking a week before what the weather would be like. But when I'm doing it today, I have to recheck every day because the weather patterns change so quickly that predicting it a week ahead has become impossible. So it has become much more volatile. And, you know, if I just think I've moved to Munich the beginning of last year from the UK, where I lived 31 years. And just the temperature differences from one day to the next can be 10, 15 degrees. And it's definitely not something I remember from earlier years. So the first one is volatile. The second one is uncertain, which means that when we are taking a particular course of action, again, in the past, it felt like we knew what the outcome would be. We knew what the consequences of certain actions were. Whereas today, this too has become quite uncertain. You know, the outcomes of our actions can be quite unknown, which is, of course, quite disconcerting. The third one, the complex one, is caused by the interactivity of the connectedness of everything that is causing non-linear reactions to occur. And again, all of these 4 aspects of VUCA lead to a huge challenge with predicting even the near future. And then the last one, the A stands, of course, for ambiguity. And if you are looking at this picture, you might see one or other animal. You might see the rabbit or you might see the duck. Maybe you can see both. But very often people see one animal first, and it takes a little bit of adjustment, and you know, maybe even pointing out that you can see 2 animals, that you realize that it's not clear. Is this a duck or is it a rabbit? And so the ambiguity, the lack of possible to fix it on one particular meaning, on one particular outcome, is the 4th aspect of this VUCA context. But I mean, how did we actually get there? Why did we end up with this particular context? And I know that the term has been coined towards the end of the last century, but I think it is really only, you're not getting any sound. You're not getting any sound. Can you just confirm you're not having any sound? Can someone let me know whether you can hear me or can't hear me? What's going on? I just did a note that you can't hear me. Rhonda? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry, what, Bettina? Dr. von
Yeah,
Stamm?
well, I just saw a message that, oh, we hear you clearly. Okay, yeah, it was just sort of a debate whether people can hear me or not. Okay.
You're beautiful.
Right, okay. Okay, yes, if you can't hear me, or if I'm speaking too fast, or if there are any problems or challenges, the best is to open the mic and interrupt me, because I don't always see the messages. So, well, I'm very glad that you can hear me. Okay, so I was just posing the question: how do we actually get to this context? You know, we've been talking about it for a little while, but it's really that we are feeling it, that everyone seems to be feeling it, has only happened in this century. And so I'd like to share 5 drivers or 5 aspects that have, in my view, led to the context that we are facing today. And of course, the first one is already up on the screen, which is that change has become exponential. The rate at which change is being introduced has become exponential. And of course, I know we've always had change. New things have always been introduced. But what has changed dramatically around the turn of the millennium is the rate at which change is being introduced. And you can see that from this graph that looks at the rate at which change has been introduced in a number of different areas, like military technology, communications, transportation technology, as well as human awareness and leadership assumptions. And you can see that these areas have developed more or less in parallel and at quite a steady state. But yet again, something happened around the turn of the millennium that the rate at which change is being introduced has exploded. And it is driven by 2 factors. It is the fact that we are having more and more data, which means more and more things can be combined with each other, which accelerates the change. And the other thing is also that time frames have been reduced. Everything is happening in a shorter period of time, as illustrated by the fact that you know, if it has taken days or weeks or even months for parcels and letters to be delivered. Now it happens in an instant, even if they are in physical form. The second aspect that is driving the conditions that we are experiencing is the connectivity. And of course, that is also the connectivity that is what has happened around the turn of the millennium, i.e. the disbursement of the internet, the access to the internet, which means that everything now is really connected. And anyone who doubts that we are globally connected, I would just like to remind you of the events we saw in 2008, where a company in your country, in the United States, the Lehman Brothers, went bankrupt, and that triggered an economic and financial crisis that was felt at a global scale. Whether it was the volcano eruption in Iceland in 2010 that played havoc with the aviation industry around the globe, maybe not quite around the globe, but it affected large parts of the aviation industry. Whether it is the freighter that got stuck in the Suez Canal, I think it was in 2021, and that has really had impacted supply chains around the globe. And it's still sometimes used as an excuse that there are problems. And of course, the most recent occurrence, I'm not quite sure how much you feel it in the United States, but certainly here in Europe, we definitely, the war is between Russia and the Ukraine, but everyone in Europe feels the consequences every time someone wants to fill up their car with fuel because the prices have skyrocketed. People are really concerned how they keep warm in the winter because energy prices have just exploded. And we know that the food supply, particularly in the African continent, is severely threatened by this war in the Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia. So, we truly are connected around the globe, and what happens in one part of the world very likely will have consequences and will affect other parts of the world. So we have the accelerated rate of change, we have the increased, almost limited connectivity, and the third is what I call convergence. You could also call it the disappearance of boundaries. And what I mean by that is that in the last century, we had nicely separate industry boundaries. It was supermarkets sold food, and insurance companies sold insurance services, and so on and so forth. And that has all become jumbled up. At least, I'm pretty sure it's the same in the United States. When you go to the supermarket, you can buy clothes, you can buy electronic consumer goods, you can buy plants, you can buy all sorts of things. So, what was previously nice and contained, these boundaries have been disappearing. And it's also in terms of manufacturing. It started with made-to-order and just-in-time manufacturing, and 3D printing adds another layer of the boundaries disappearing between organizations, between different functions. And one of the key drivers behind this is the smartphone, which was, of course, only introduced 15 years ago in 2007. And if you think about the functionality, the offerings that are contained on your smartphone, it goes from, of course, it is still a phone, it is also an address book, it is a library, it is an entertainment center, it is part of a doctor's surgery, it helps you track your glucose levels or whatever. So it is all these things were previously contained to particular organizations, particular industries, and now it all starts to merge and starts to overlap. And I think it has also started with the introduction of smartphones, but COVID has given it another significant push, and that is the blurring of the boundaries between our personal and our professional lives. I don't know how many of you have been affected by having to work from home, and I don't know what your experience was with getting up, trying to have a proper start of the day and a proper end of the day, so that there is a work period and an off work period. But I know that many people find that really difficult, and they had to learn how to manage these kinds of boundaries that were previously given by leaving the house to go to the place of work and leaving the place of work to come back home. And of course that has disappeared. And I think that really has lack of boundaries is also something that is really challenging for us human beings, because our brain is constructed and organized in a way that it prefers clear boundaries. It likes to be able to put something in boxes, and there is research into how our brain operates, and you can literally place certain bits of knowledge into certain areas, into certain boxes in our brain. So having to deal with a lack of boundaries can be quite disconcerting and quite challenging for us as humans. So that is the third one. And the fourth one is what I would like to refer to as we as consumers have been changing. The fact that through the connectivity, through the internet, we have access to almost any kind of information. So when I'm not feeling quite well, I'll probably, I know I'll go and Google what the symptoms might be indicative of. If I want to buy to make a cake, I will go onto the internet and look at different recipes and decide which one I would like to do. And I think sort of the access to all this information that we have has made us as consumers much more demanding. And not only that, we also want to feel that we want to use our influence to affect what companies are doing, how companies are doing things. And we see that the younger the generations are, for example, the more important sustainability becomes to them. And again, it's really quite interesting, even 5-10 years ago, when I would ask audiences, what is the next big thing that will influence consumer purchasing decisions? Very few would answer that it is around social and environmental issues. Yet, now we do have this is a piece of research from this year, from 2022. We can see that particularly the young generation say, well, I want to put my money where I know it will not have an adverse effect on people and planet. And so that also means that because we have become more demanding as consumers, we want to get involved. We don't want to leave it to the organization to do things for us. So if we are going back to the beginning of the last century, when the car manufacturing started off, we have the famous quote from Henry Ford, who said, you can have your car in any color you like as long as it is black. So the organizations were dictating, were telling the customers, the consumers, what they could and couldn't get. Whereas today we say, well, now hang on a second, I would like to influence the things that I'm buying. So, today, if organizations want to thrive and succeed, it is no longer doing things for people, but it is about doing things with people. And again, the evidence for that, particularly for the younger generations, in this piece of research, 83% of millennial and Gen Z consumers surveyed indicated an increased likelihood to purchase from a brand that asks them for feedback. So they really, they just don't want to just take it. They want to be involved. They want to be asked. And then the fifth and final aspect that I see as a key driver for the conditions that we are experiencing today is what I call the challenges to humanity. And of course, most in the last few years, the greatest awareness was driven by COVID, and we felt that was the greatest threat that we are actually facing. And cynically, you could say, just wash your hand and we'll all be all right. That was probably at the beginning of the pandemic, and we all know that is definitely not quite sufficient, and we are not by a long way not done with COVID yet. As I said, I live in Munich, and we have the Oktoberfest, ironically always happening at the end of September rather than in October, where there are masses of people coming together, and we've already seen the COVID numbers rise again quite quickly. So we're definitely not done with COVID. But by the focus on COVID, we tend to forget that there are other things that are following in the wake of it, and that are even greater threats to us. As I'm sure you've heard about the increasing rates of inflation that are affecting countries everywhere. But of course, beyond that, even more threatening to humanity and our planet is the climate change, and even more threatening than that is the loss of biodiversity, the collapse of biodiversity. And of course, one of the things with all of these four things, they are not separate. We can't treat them separately. We can't deal with them separately because they are all interconnected. And because I think it is really so important to understand where we are with the where we are in the progression as society, as a planet. Because unless we really understand the challenges, I think we will spend our energy in the wrong places. We will innovate in the wrong directions. And I also like to talk about the dark side of innovation, which is another talk, which I will not go into detail here. But we really need to think about, given the challenges that we are facing, where do we spend our energy? Where do we spend our resources, our time, our money? And just to point out, we were doing reasonably well with reducing hunger in the world, but since 2015, so well before any of the recent crises, the percentage of the population that is suffering from severe hunger on a daily basis has gone up quite dramatically. We are almost back to where we were 20 years ago or 15 years ago. At the same time, we are seeing that an ever larger percentage of the population is growing obese, while also the divide between those who have a lot and those who have very little grows wider and wider. And it is a very, very small percentage of the world's population that holds a huge amount of wealth, whereas a very large percentage of the population, of the global population, holds very little. And again, what we are, the consequences of our actions are visible, are felt, are measurable. We of course could have known for a very long time, but we preferred to look away. But now, and basically, the CO2 concentration is the highest level it has been for 2 million years. We have seen the sea level rises at the fastest rate in the last 3,000 years. Arctic sea ice is also decreasing, as is sea ice is decreasing, as are the glaciers. So these are all consequences of our action. And of course, all of this is driven by the fact that, that's biodiversity loss, I've mentioned that already, but again, the alarming rate at which, the exponential rate with which biodiversity decreases around the globe. And one of the things that really, in some way, puzzles me is that we know that our planet is a system. And yet, we are surprised that a system does not behave in a linear way. We know that systems tend to behave exponentially, not linear. And so when you're here in the news again and again, how surprised scientists are that the rate at which the glaciers are melting is accelerating exponentially, and the rate at which animals are going extinct is accelerating exponentially. I just think, well, we should have known, we could have known. And of course, that is caused by the number of resources that humanity takes away from Earth. And I don't know whether you're familiar with the concept of the ecological footprint. The ecological footprint is basically the number of resources that we as humanity, or we can break it down by country, by town, by individual, the use of the resources that we claim for us. But when we had in 1961, we were using 73% of the planet's biocapacity. If we're looking at 2020, we used 160%. And even if math is not your favorite topic, I think it's quite easy to realize that we cannot use 160% of something when only 100% exist. And another way to illustrate that is through the Earth Overshoot Day, which is showing here in this graph that whereas around 1970 or the beginning of the 70s, we were using just about the right amount of resources that our planet can regenerate in a year's time. by basically today the amount of resources we use mean that we would really require 1.75 Earths, which of course are not available to us. And I sometimes can't quite understand why we are spending so much time and money investigating how we can get to planet Mars, and I only half-jokingly say that if we are waiting a little bit longer, the conditions on planet Earth will be exactly like they are on Mars, because we have destroyed nature to the degree that it will look here quite similar as it looks there. So what is the overall consequences of these 5 drivers? I know that we're describing the context we are living in as a VUCA context, but I really think for me what is the most critical aspect is the degree of complexity that we are facing. And why is that important, and why do we need complexity or understand complexity above everything else? Well, I think it is important to acknowledge and understand the difference between something that is complicated and something that is complex. The thing is that in the last century, our context, our world was complicated. There were generally relationships that at least felt linear, and with a complicated system, you can study it, and if you study it long enough, you will understand how it behaves, how it has behaved in the past, how it is behaving at present, and how it will behave in future. And what is more important, with a complicated system, you can take it apart, you can change parts, you can manipulate it, and through that manipulating, you even know how that manipulation will cause it to behave in future. So it is all, you know, it's quite nice in a way, because you can understand it, you can manipulate it, you can predict it. However, if you are living in a complex system, you might study it and you might understand how it has arrived at where it is today, but trying to predict on how a complex system will behave in future, where it will go in future, is really, really difficult. It's literally impossible. So, and I think, you know, to come back to the example of the weather, you know, 20 years ago, we were able to predict with reasonable certainty the weather for 1-2 weeks in advance. Today, it is more like a couple of days. And so what is important to understand is if we want to thrive in complexity, there is a framework that I have come across when I was writing my dissertation, and it is a framework from cybernetics by a chap called Ross Ashby, who created this framework back in 1956. So, you know, it's quite an old framework, but to me it made complete sense, and I think it's really important to understand. And so basically what it says is that the context or the task is really very complex. Then that kind of complexity needs to be matched by the way we engage with it, by the way we respond to it. And so what we should aspire to is to be on what he calls the line of requisite variety. So that's the appropriate amount of complexity. If we're in a very complex environment, we need to mirror that environment with the complexity in how we approach it, how we act in it. Because if we are having a task and environment that is of low complexity, but we are, you know, innovation is my background, so let me use an example from there. So, for example, if we've got an incremental change of a product or service, and we are putting together an interdisciplinary team, i.e. sort of the task is relatively simple, but our approach to the response is highly complex, that is a complete overkill. That's a waste of resources. On the other hand, if we are trying to accomplish something radical or even transformational, and we are trying to use a linear approach, or we are trying to bring limited different skill and mindsets to bear, then we will basically, it's a complete underestimation of the task, and we will never be able to do the task justice. And so my argument is that these 5 drivers, the accelerated rate of change, connectivity, convergence, changing consumers, and the challenges to humanity, those combined create an environment that is as complex as nothing we have experienced before. And so the challenge is, how do we thrive in that kind of complexity? And so the first thing, again, I offer four things that I believe will help us to embrace this kind of complexity and to thrive in that kind of complexity. And so the first thing is that we need to learn to do things concurrently. I don't know how much you are involved in the development of things, and I know that changes have been implemented over the last 20-25 years, from passing it on from department to department to department to work in more interdisciplinary teams. But I really think we need to do much more of it. Because if things were like that in the past, you almost could do things in a linear sequential fashion. But today things look like this. And unless you do things concurrently, you will not be able to respond in a timely enough manner. And this, I think, is also one of the reasons why we've moved away from this linear approach to developing things to a more agile, concurrent approach. And so, to me, it is no wonder that the agile approach has become so popular so fast and is being embraced by so many organizations. The second thing that we need to do, and you will notice I've found 4 C's for this side of the equation as well. The second one is the collaboration that was already mentioned before. And one thing about collaboration is it is not collaboration of like-minded people. It's not collaboration of all kinds of people who think alike. What we need is as many different mindsets as possible to emulate the complexity in our response and our approach that we find in the challenges that we are trying to address. And that kind of collaboration, I sometimes also refer to collaboration across communities, sort of where communities are people of shared mind and value sets, is that in the best case scenario, it can look like this, where there is a huge degree of miscommunication. Because particularly when we are using the same language, we assume that we share meaning. But when we are collaborating across functional, organizational, or national boundaries, meaning can vary quite considerably. And it is not for nothing that it is often said that the UK and America are 2 nations divided by a shared language. But this is how it looks in the best case scenario, and at worst, it looks like something like this, where everyone is against everyone. And of course, this is not how we can create and find the solution that we need if we want to address the challenges that we are facing. And so what I think, because this kind of collaboration is critical, we need to understand what needs to be in place to enable such collaboration. And I think there are, for any truly successful collaboration, there need to be 2 things that need to be in place. And the first is a rational component. A rational component can be having a shared goal or ambition, or it can be that there is something in it for everyone who is involved in this collaboration. And the second aspect is an emotional component. And the emotional component is about, how much do I trust and respect the people with whom I am supposed to collaborate? Do I enjoy working with them? To say that you need to like them is going a step too far, but unless you trust and respect people, you will not share all your knowledge. You will not believe what they are saying. You will not try to integrate their knowledge into what you are doing. You will just sort of be reserved, and we just cannot afford to do that. And so, in my view, it is really respect and understanding each other's contribution, to understand the necessity to bring these different skill and mindsets to the party, I think is the most critical one here. And I found this lovely quote from Henry David Thoreau, who said, "If a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it is because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music he hears, however measured or far away." And I think this is really, if we want to address the challenges, if we want to have this kind of collaboration that we need, then we also need to develop this deep appreciation, respect, and tolerance to those who do things different from the way we are doing it. Because, there certainly is no one right way. in this context that we are operating. There is only an approach that might be most appropriate given a particular context and a particular point in time. So this whole conception or the notion of, what is the one right way, we have to let go of, which again is probably quite challenging. My third C then is co-creation, and I mean, I used to call it innovation, and I will come back to innovation in a moment. But I really think it is beyond what we normally understand to be innovation, and it has to be co-creation. And the reason for that, again, is this complex context that we are facing. And so, if you look at different levels of innovation, from incremental to radical, and you look at the environmental complexity, which is from low complexity to high complexity, then you are getting again one of those lovely 2x2 matrices. And again, I would argue that in the past, in the last century, we had relatively low environmental complexity. So it was absolutely fine to work with an established frame of mind and exploit what is already there. If we are then moving into, even when it's just incremental, but if we are facing high complexity, we need to create a new frame. We need to reframe what we are seeing and what we are approaching, how we are going about it. If we are looking again at low complexity and want something radical, it is really, you might also want to think about incremental and radical innovation are about staying on an existing trajectory. It's not creating something that is entirely new. But if you are experiencing the high environmental complexity and you want something radical, the only way to create that, the only way to achieve that, is to co-evolve. And it also means that when you start your journey, you're probably not sure where you will end. And of course, that is again something that is quite uncomfortable, particularly in the organizational context, because where are we going with this? What will be the outcome of our action? How can we be sure of our return on investment? And to be able to let go of that to a certain degree is one of the huge challenges I think that we are facing in organizations today. Yes, and I keep coming back to the fact that we really, if we want to address the challenges that we have created for ourselves, if we want to address the climate crisis, the only way to do that is to co-create. And it is also, I said I will not talk about the dark side of innovation so much, but I'd just like to mention a little bit, because any innovation, any technology is neither good nor bad. It depends what we do with it. And so when we co-create, we need to be careful to put things in place that ensure that we are creating something that has positive intention, like, for example, solar panels. We are not using them. That destroys nature even more by cutting down forests to put down solar farms, to covering fields with solar panels, probably using pesticides and other things to keep the grass low so we're getting our maximum benefit of the solar panels. Then there are alternatives by putting solar panels on existing infrastructure, rather than using things that we have already taken from nature, or areas that we've already taken from nature, rather than claiming even more land. And of course, an extreme example is also original. We can use nuclear fusion for destroying each other, or we can use it to generate energy. Even though I have a huge question mark whether nuclear energy will ever be. I would never ever call nuclear energy a sustainable energy, as it just recently been done here in the European Union, and the mind boggles how people can do that, but never mind, that's what it is. But the thing is, when we are co-creating to address the challenges that we face, we need to make sure that we are not making the problems worse, that we are truly co-creating to make things better. And then the final C I have to offer here is caring. So how to thrive in a post-COVID and highly complex context is to actually care. And I'd like to build on the or point out the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed in an amazing effort by the United Nations back in 2015, and which provide some great insights, some great guidelines, some great reference points on where we should focus on our energy. So when we co-create, we should co-create with the desire to address one of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and improve our performance within these. So these are sort of, what has driven the context of our century, what is the overarching condition, i.e. complexity, and then what kind of things can we do to be able to thrive to thrive in this 21st century complex context. And one of the key things to enable that really is a different style of leadership. And I've started with this graph, and I don't know whether you noticed that one of the lines is picked out in red, and that is leadership assumptions, and there is a good reason for it. Because whereas all the rate at which change is being introduced, i.e. the degree to which the system is changing, has changed dramatically for all other 4 areas under investigation, the way we think about leadership, what we believe, how leadership, the way we think about leadership, the way we lead, is continuing on the old trajectory. And for me, I always like to describe it like if you've got one of those children's mobiles where you've got figures hanging that move around, and one moves, the others move accordingly because everything is interconnected. If the system moves in one way and one of the elements of the system is moving into a different direction, it's just not possible. It cannot work. And here I'd just like to briefly do a very brief excursion into innovation more specifically, but because we know that leadership is the best predictor of innovation performance. And I think I'm also using this example because I think it is quite relevant also for leading generally in this context that we are facing, and that is that it is important to differentiate between leading off and leading for. One of the reasons I came across that is that very often in innovation it's said that middle managers are the major blockers to innovation. And I started to think about why that is. And at least I came to the conclusion that most organizations have a heavy emphasis on cost cutting and efficiency drives almost all the time. And so it's only logic that the people who are very good at that are being rewarded by being promoted into decision-making positions. That, for me, indicates that we have, at the decision-making level, a lot of people with a mindset that is really good at cutting costs, improving efficiencies, which is a particular mindset that you need in order to do that, so very detail-focused. Now, if you go to these people with a crazy idea, and as Einstein said, if an idea is not crazy at the outset, there is no hope for it. If you go to these people with that particular mindset, with a crazy idea, they will feel really threatened. They just think, I've just spent years trying to improve our efficiencies, and now this crazy lady comes with an idea, and she doesn't even know what our market share will be and who our customers will be and all sorts of things. Because very often you can't answer this question if it is sort of really a radical innovation. This person will be really uncomfortable, and they don't know what to do with it. They know that the organization's doctrine is to say we need to innovate, but personally they are really, really uncomfortable. And so I think it is important to understand the difference between the people who are great at leading innovation, who have got this slightly crazy mind, but beyond that, they are probably very good at engaging others in their idea. They are very resourceful. They've got a great network. So they are the idea people to make innovation happen. And we have those who are leading for innovation. They need to be aware of what it takes for innovation to thrive. And so my wish would be, we need the people who are great at cutting costs and improving efficiencies. We absolutely need them. And we need to understand that we are putting them in an impossible position if we are asking them to make decisions about innovation. And so what I would wish is you know, if Carla comes to Henry, Henry is the manager who's just managed to cut costs and improve efficiencies, and Carla is the one with the crazy idea. So if Carla goes to Henry and says, I've got this crazy idea, Henry will say, well, you know me, I hate this kind of stuff. But Linda is really a crazy one. She just thrives on everything that's crazy, that's different, that's new. So let the three of us go together and take a look at it, and then we can make a decision that's in the best interest of the organization rather than following our own particular passion. And so this is why I think it is really important to understand leading off and leading for. And I think the same is true when we want to think about the kind of leadership that we need, is that the leaders we need might not thrive on this VUCA context, on this highly complex context, but they need to understand what the conditions are that they need to create if they want to succeed. And so the one is about executing projects, the other one is about providing the context. And if we are thinking about, you know, one of the definitions about leadership that I absolutely love is leadership is about inspiring others to higher levels of performance. And so for me, that then means that in a highly complex context, it means that in a complex world, we need leaders who see emerging patterns. We don't need leaders to know everything, but we need them to be able to see patterns and understand how to translate them into visions. So it is not that the leaders need to be able to tell us exactly what to do, but they need to paint the vision so that we can move towards it, and they need to provide the direction and the clarity in this world that is just so confusing, so that we, if we are, you know, lower down in the hierarchy, we know where we can focus our resources and how we can engage. We need leaders who understand themselves and who know what their contribution is, like Henry. You know, we need people who know, I thrive on change, I thrive on innovation, I thrive on trying out different things, or I'm highly averse to it, and both is absolutely okay. I just need to understand it, and I need to be able to communicate it, and I need to be able to collaborate and to work with those who have a different perspective so that we are making the most appropriate decisions. And in this fast-paced environment, we just do not have time for political games. We do not have time to think about, you know, all this backstabbing and that goes on. We will never address the challenges that we have if we are focused on those things. And finally, we really need to have the courage and the humility to let go of our assumption that we can control things. We cannot control things. Control is an illusion, particularly, you know, this illusion was possible in a linear, complicated context, but in a complex world, you know, to believe that we can control things definitely is not much more than an illusion. And I really feel I need to speed up, because I'm not quite sure how much time for questions will be left if I'm going through all my slides. So let me just sort of speed it up a bit, and I will skip to a couple of stories that I wanted to share, and just focus on a couple of aspects that I think is required from leaders in a post-COVID world, and which is to be authentic. And that plays to what I've just said a bit earlier about, you know, not knowing who we are, acknowledging who we are, and not engaging in any political games. It's just a waste of resources. And there's a book called Why Should Anyone Be Led by You, which I think is not only a brilliant title, but it's also brilliant content. And Rob Goffey and Gareth Jones are the ones that identified that successful leaders are authentic leaders, and these are 4 aspects that set leaders apart. When you Google it, there's also a Harvard Business Review article of the same title that gives you the key insights that then are elaborated on in the book. And this is a lovely quote from Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, who said, "We teach kindness and empathy and compassion to our children, but then we somehow, when it comes to political leadership, want a complete absence of that. So I'm trying to chart a different path that will attract critics, but I can only be true to myself. And I truly wish there were more people who felt and acted like Jacinda Ardern, because she really is a brilliant example of compassion, of tolerance, of foresightedness and care for the people she feels responsible for. The second kind, sort of the second thought on leadership is a shift from traditional leadership, where everyone else works to support the leader, to what is also known as servant leadership, where the leaders are really there to support others, and that is sort of connects to the leading for innovation, where the responsibility is to provide the context in which others can thrive. And of course, that is already several. That the concept of servant leadership is 30, 40 years old, and it was Robert K. Greenleaf who wrote a book about it. But if you Google servant leadership now, you will find that there's a plethora of books that address these topics. I will be happy to share the slides with you. I will not go through the list of aspects that characterize the servant leadership, but as I said, you can read through it. And also, that's the wonderful thing about the internet. You can Google anything within a couple of seconds, and you've got lots of valuable information. And I love this quote. So, servant leadership is all about making the goals clear, then rolling your sleeves up and doing whatever it takes to help people win. And that situations, they don't work for you, you work for them. And that is by Ken Blanchard, who's also written a number of books that are well worth looking at in the leadership context. And then, if serving is below you, leadership is beyond you. Something also to keep in mind. I have got two more points, and the third one I'd like to offer up what we need more in order to cope in the 21st century is female leadership, and this is just a very short clip, and no worries, there is no sound, just observe and enjoy. There we are. It is sometimes, the female way of doing things can be a little bit more straightforward at times, a little bit convoluted. And in terms of what is required in terms of leadership traits in the 21st century, there's been a huge study where about 300,000 people were asked, what do we need from leaders in the 21st century? And these 10 traits came out on top. And then the researchers engaged in the second round, where they asked, these are the top leadership qualities that are required for the 21st century. Would you say these, and again, it was around 300,000 people. And again, the question, here the question was, do you consider them to be more female or male traits? And here we see the results. And there's a reason, that the pale blue, the decisive and resilient were the only two that were attributed by those 300,000 people to be male attributes. The rest was considered to be female. And again, this is the book that talks about this research and the implications of that. Yeah. Let's skip this one as well. There are lots of Dare to Lead Like a Girl is a book that is fairly recently that also goes along the same lines. So anyone interested, I would suggest this is a good place to start. And then my final suggestion is what leaders need to do, what leadership needs to focus on, is a move away from the ego to the eco. And I think that is probably the biggest challenge, to put others first, which connects with the servant leadership, not to think ourselves, not for us, humanity, to think of ourselves as the pinnacle of creation, but understand that we are but a small part of the wider system on which we so critically rely. Again, sort of a recommendation, I don't know whether you are familiar with Paul Polman, the former CEO of Unilever, who has also written, co-authored a book called Net Positive. He also said and pointed out that looking at the world through a sustainability lens not only helps us future-proof our supply chain, it also fuels innovation and drives brand growth. And there's a huge amount of, or an ever large amount of evidence that the companies that try to focus on something beyond their little profit, raking in the profit, but who try to make a contribution to the world at large, tend to do financially better, and are also more successful in attracting talents. And so I will skip through these ones as well, because I'd like to just have a couple of minutes at least for questions. And just summarize, sorry, all these bills that I now wish I hadn't got, and I have to probably stop, otherwise, going to the out of the presentation. I'd just like to summarize sort of what I have shared with you. So we looked at the context, at the key condition of the overarching condition, on what we can do to embrace it, and then what leadership needs, so what kind of leadership is required in order to support it and make it possible. And with that, I will stop talking and invite some questions.
First of all, I just want to say thank you so much, Dr. von Stamm. That was a phenomenal overview and just all of your thought leadership and really looking at the trends and looking what you've seen to be most successful with organizations, et cetera. And thank you for that as well. I think, could we go back one slide, please?
Yes.
Just briefly, yes.
I just need to do the bird. Keep talking while it starts populating again.
Yes, so because that was such a phenomenal place to speak to the questions about. So I think our questions were about, maybe if you could just give, in a nutshell, I know this is a very deep question one of our personnel asked, but can you talk about, you were saying there's a positive light to innovation and a negative area of innovation, and then all of these trends that are moving us towards greater transparency and collaboration, et cetera. Can you, from your view of the world, could you say where we fall along that continuum as far as being able to harness, concurrency, collaboration, co-creation, and caring to the level that we could, especially in this leadership arena?
In terms of where we are, in terms of where we could be, I think we are probably 8% or 5% of the way. It's a long way to go. It's a long way to go. Yeah, I think there is. I'm getting a little bit more hopeful because I can see, the beginnings of exponential change creeping up in this area too. But just ask all of you, ask yourself, what kind of organization am I working for? What is the reality in my organization? Are we putting people and planet at an equal level with profit? Are we making decisions based on the impact on the planet and the wider environment? Or are all decisions still solely driven by a profit motive? And we could have a quick poll in the, I don't know, if I had prepared a poll, we could do that, and everyone could just say, yes, no, whatever. So to just look around you, talk to your friends, and you probably get a feel, whether I'm right with my 5 to 8% of the way. Think about the leaders you encounter. Are they able to let go of their ego? Are they able to put their ego aside to serve the greater good or the greater need? Is the focus on regeneration? Because again, given that we are requiring 1.75 planet Earth, talking about sustainability is by no means enough. We need to regenerate as quickly as ever possible. So yes, but sorry, I should stop talking and allow for more questions.
You were phenomenal. So I think that the comments and so forth, let's talk about us as leaders and practitioners, both in industry and in nonprofits that have some way to provide, to amplify thought leadership or be a change catalyst in this area. You know, if you had to choose the one thing you would ask of us, what would that be, Dr. von Stamm?
Well, help create awareness both of the urgency and that it is possible. I truly believe that all we need is already there. All we need, we know everything. You know, we've known since the report by the Club of Rome that came out in 1972, the limits to growth. We have known since then the challenges that we would be walking towards and what can be done about it. And it is humanity, we as humanity have an unbelievable ability to stick our head in the sand and ignore what is happening around us. So my invitation, my wish would be, you know, pull your head out of the sand and, you know, look at what is there without despairing, which is not easy, admittedly. So to create awareness for the absolute urgency, for the absolute need to act for all of us, and you know, connect people with information that helps them understand, that gives them examples of what can be done, you know, because again, you know, through the internet, we have got, if we want to find examples of what to do and how to do it, they are out there. You know, I'm sure most of you will have heard of the owner of Patagonia finding a way to ensure that all profits that the company generates will benefit the planet. You know, there are people out there. I mean, Paul Polman used to be CEO of Unilever, and he has done a huge amount to put a huge organization such as Unilever on track towards sustainability and regeneration. You know, so there are a lot of examples out there. So that would be my wish. And of course, I'm always there to help you, you know, to come into your organization and either share a presentation like this or do a workshop or whatever, which would always be my pleasure.
Thank you so much. Yes, if you could go forward one slide now. So yes, for everyone on the line, Dr. von Stamm is available. So here's the different ways that you can connect with her. We are hoping that she will share her work with us. So we will reach back and figure out how that we can share this work with you also, that you have discussion points and something to pull from. So again, Dr. von Stamm, thank you so much for being our very esteemed guest speaker. This is a phenomenal area that's really cutting edge and helping to shift each and every one of us forward just through being a thought leader and being a catalyst in our own organizations that we are a part of. And we're so grateful for you for identifying the opportunity space for us and really solidifying what you're seeing from this international trend, et cetera. So again, huge thank you to Dr. von Stamm for her thought leadership and sharing all of her learnings and the journey, and really being the catalyst for us moving forward in so many different areas. You can join, thank you so much, ASQ Innovation TC on My ASQ. All of you will get this deck after so that you will have Dr. von Stamm's information as well as these links. We invite you to read our ASQE Insights on Excellence, which really is a look at the major drivers globally around this innovation and quality digital transformation space. If you are not a member, we have information for you to join if you loved what you heard and experienced today. And then we invite you to our next two webinars, 1027 and 1110, where we'll discuss digital quality leadership, a new look at change with Dr. Nicole Radziwill, and a business case for cultivating purpose with Ms. Ciara Unger. Again, thank you to our esteemed guest speaker. We invite you back on 1027, and we will get your certification units, our certificate of appreciation for our wonderful guest speaker, as well as information on how you can gain access to her phenomenal thought leadership. And again, an invitation to connect with her so she can bring her wealth of experience and insights to you directly and your organizations. That's it for ASQ Innovation Technical Community today. We wish you a wonderful rest of your Friday, a wonderful restorative weekend, and we look forward to serving you at our next webinar. Thank you again, Dr. von Stamm. Blessings.
Bye. Bye.